Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's The Expanse Season 4 Recap. This video is a part of a series of videos where I recap the events of the Expanse TV show. In these videos, I don't give my opinion at all, I just recap the events that occurred in Season 4 of The Expanse to refresh your memory in preparation for Season 5. This video will of course be heavy on spoilers, so it's not recommended that you watch this video if you have not seen Season 4. I'd recommend to watch the actual show instead. But if it's been a while since you've seen Season 4 and you need a refresher before Season 5 airs, that's what this video is here for. This will be a long and detailed recap in order to recap the season properly, so if you're looking for a brief 5-minute recap of Season 4, I suggest you look elsewhere. This video is going to be as long as necessary in order to properly recap the season. Also, if you're looking for recaps of the first 3 seasons of The Expanse, I also made videos recapping those seasons. I have a video for Season 1 and 2 of The Expanse and a video for Season 3 of The Expanse. I'll put link to those videos in the description below. So, after the events of Season 3, the Behemoth remained in the ring space where it is renamed Medina Station, as it has become the hub of the ring space officially controlled by the OPA, who have a tenuous alliance with the UN and Mars. The UN, however, has taken to blockading the ring so that only authorized ships can enter, despite there being a huge demand of colony ships wanting to travel through the ring gates in order to travel to one of the thousands of habitable worlds on the other side in order to colonize it. However, due to the mysterious nature of the alien gates and the protomolecule technology, Secretary General Christian Avasarala has deemed any such colonization efforts as too dangerous. However, a fleet of Belter ships carrying refugees from Ganymede managed to successfully run the blockade, and they make it through the ring gates with intentions of colonizing one of the alien worlds. A year later, the Rocinante is on Earth, where Holden is visiting his family. Holden still sees and talks to Miller, who is still insistent that he go through the ring gates in order to solve the case. Naomi is unable to withstand Earth's intense gravity well, so remains on the Rocinante, where she communicates with Holden and his family. Meanwhile, Amos communicates with Clarissa Mao, who apparently they formed a close relationship when the Rocinante transported her back to Earth. She's not faring well in prison, but Amos tells her to hang in there while giving her the nickname Peaches. Avasarala faces heat from a politician named Nancy Gao, who wants her to open up the ring gates to colonization to help ease the overpopulation situation on Earth. But Avasarala refuses, as she feels it's still too dangerous, as they still don't know enough about the protomolecule and its creators. Avasarala then meets with Holden to give him a mission to go through the ring gates. She explains that the Belters that ran the blockade and slipped through the ring gates a year ago settled on a planet they are calling Illis. The planet is rich in lithium, which the settlers are mining, but they also discovered strange alien structures on the planet, which Avasarala suspects is related to the protomolecule technology. And with Holden being the closest thing they have to an expert on the protomolecule, she wants him to investigate. However, coming along with them will be a ship, the Edward Israel, which is carrying a team from the corporation Royal Charter Energy, or RCE, who are claiming legal rights to the planet, which they refer to as New Terror. On Mars, Bobby Draper has settled back into civilian life there, as she works at a factory that decommissions military technology no longer in use. She lives with her brother Benji and her nephew David. She receives a call from Alex on the Rocinante as they are passing by Mars on their way to the ring gates. Bobby and Alex reminisce, and she asks how he feels about going to an alien world to investigate the protomolecule, but he says that she wouldn't understand because she doesn't feel fear. But she says that she does, but the trick is to know that you're serving a greater good. Later at a bar, Bobby meets a man named Thomas who also served in the military. Bobby assumes he would look at her as a traitor, as most people in the military do, but he sees her as a hero who got a bad rap, and they bond over drinks. In the Belt, Klaus Ashford is hunting after the Belter pirates that are attacking the Earth and Mars colony ships trying to go through the ring gates. Ashford manages to catch one of the pirates who spits venom at him, accusing him of working for the Inners and betraying the Belt. But Ashford is only trying to maintain the peace treaty between the OPA and the UN. Ashford then returns to Medina Station, but antagonizes the UN by delaying to give the proper access codes to make it to the ring space. Kamina Drummer is in command of Medina Station, where Ashford still serves as her first officer, and she asks him not to antagonize the Inners, but he insists that they like humiliating them. Drummer talks to Naomi as the Rosnate passes through the ring space on their way to Illis, and Drummer calls the Belters that settled there foolish, as Belters are creatures of space. But Naomi insists that they have a right to decide what kind of life they want to lead. As the Rosnate passes through the ring space, the Edward Israel arrives at Illis first. They send a heavy shuttle down with their science and security teams. However, an incident occurs when the shuttle tries to land and it crashes instead. 23 people die in the crash, including the mission commander. The security chief, a man named Murtry, takes over as mission commander, while a scientist named Elvie survives the crash but was traumatized by the horrific event as she had to watch people around her die. The civilians were treated by medics that live on Illis, led by a nurse named Lucia Mazur, who helps save Elvie's life. During the trip, Naomi underwent a vigorous exercise routine to try to prepare her body to enter an atmosphere. Being born in space is something her body isn't used to. Once they arrive, the Rosnate lands on the planet and the crew walk out into the alien world, including Naomi, who is a bit disorientated at first but manages to adjust. They walk into the settlement where they are greeted by Murtry, who welcomes them to New Terror, but a few Belters ask if they've come to help them. When Holden doesn't answer, the crowd starts shouting traitors at them, and someone throws a rock which causes Murtry and his team to raise their guns, and the Belters raise their guns in response. However, they're interrupted when a swarm of strange mechanical insects swarm the settlement and they all have to take cover. Holden takes it as a sign that the alien technology is still active on Illis. On Mars, Avasarala arrives with her husband to attend a summit with the Prime Minister of Mars. She invites Bobby Draper to come along. Draper isn't sure if she wants to go, but then she is detained and interrogated by the local police in connection to a dock worker who was murdered at his job. The police officer questions why a dock worker on Mars would get an invitation by the Secretary General of the UN to attend the summit, and Draper accepts the invitation in front of her in order to spite her, but then she accuses Draper of being a traitor to Mars. Draper then attends the summit, where all the Martians there snub her and are rude to her, but Christian Avasarala's husband, Arjun, greets her and is very friendly to her as they watch Christian give her speech. Afterwards, Draper confronts Avasarala on why she was brought her to the summit, accusing her of using her as a political token, but Avasarala insists that she wanted to see her again and offered her a job working for her again, but Draper insists being there was humiliating and she rejects Avasarala's offer. On Ellis, Naomi finds the source of where the mechanical insects came from, and it's one of the strange alien structures. So Holden, Naomi, and LV go there to investigate, and LV and Naomi don't get along. Holden touches the structure as if he has a strange connection with it, but he can't get inside. Back on the ship, Alex discovers that Naomi is not adjusting well to being in an atmosphere and is struggling health-wise, but she makes Alex promise her not to tell Holden. Later, Holden gets a visit from Miller, giving him instructions how to get inside the alien structure. He and Alex go to investigate, but Alex stays above as Holden climbs down, and Miller tells him to activate the alien structure so they can find out what happened to the protomolecule creators. Holden is hesitant at first, but then agrees, but when he does, the alien structure nearly crushes him, but Alex gets him out of there in the nick of time. Meanwhile, Amos hangs out in town and makes himself at home at the local bar. The Belters try to kick him out as they don't like Murtry and his team, but Amos makes it clear that he's not friends with Murtry and then barters his bullets for alcohol. While drinking, a member of Murtry's team, a woman named Wei, comes up and flirts with Amos by drinking his shots. The two of them then hook up, but are later interrupted by noises coming from outside as Murtry confronts three Belters and accuses them of setting the bomb that crashed his shuttle. They deny it and bring up past grievances on how Inners have mistreated Belters. One of the Belters says something to threaten Murtry, and Murtry responds by shooting the man in the head, and Amos and Wei move quickly to calm the situation down. Back on Mars, while Bobby Draper is at home, she observes her nephew David sneaking out late at night. She follows him and discovers that he's involved in creating drugs. He says they're only focus drugs and insists that she leave immediately, but she refuses. And then the girl she saw him with earlier, a woman named Lily, enters and insists that David finish the batch by tonight. But Draper announces that David is leaving and not working for them anymore. Lily simply tells David that his aunt is becoming a problem and threatens Draper, so Bobby beats the crap out of Lily and her two men and threatens Lily, telling her in no uncertain terms that David doesn't work for them anymore, but Lily just insists that Bobby is really fucked now. On Ellis, things start to heat up as the Belters surround Murtry and his team, threatening them. They all pull guns on them, warning them to get back, but they're outnumbered. However, Holden calls Amos to warn him that a lightning storm is headed their way. He believes the storm was caused by whatever Miller turned on. The storm hits the settlement, causing damage, and the crowd disperse, their troubles forgotten. Amos and Naomi work to repair the damage caused by the lightning. When Amos needs parts that they don't have, he goes to take some from the RCE team, who don't take kindly to Amos taking their parts. But when they try to stop him, Amos just beats the piss out of them, which leads to a standoff with guns drawn, but Wei steps in to de-escalate the situation, but warns Amos not to provoke them again. Meanwhile, Naomi goes to the med bay on the Rosnate and learns her health is deteriorating fast, but she returns to the planet anyway to help in the repairs. She helps Lucia and her family, her husband Jacob, and her daughter Felcia in repairing the medical bay. Felcia bonds with Naomi on how smart she is, and she expresses interest in returning to the Belt to attend university, but Lucia is not pleased to hear this and insists they all need to stay on Illis. She sends Felcia away and asks Naomi not to put such ideas in her head. Later, after Naomi sticks up for Lucia with Murtry, Lucia and Naomi have a moment of bonding when Lucia tells Naomi she needs to leave Ellis immediately or she'll die, that her physiology just can't take being in an atmosphere anymore. Back on Earth, Nancy Gao resigns her position in Avasarala's administration and announces that she's going to run against Avasarala in the next election on the platform of removing the blockade and allowing the alien worlds beyond the ring gates to be colonized. Avasarala confronts Nancy Gow when she officially resigns in person, saying that such a colonization effort could be the end of the human race, but Gow simply says that she looks forward to having this debate in public. Then Avasarala and her husband prepare for a rough campaign. On Mars, Bobby Draper returns home to find that David is missing. Eventually, she gets a call from him saying that he's being held against his will and that his captors want to meet her to discuss his release. Bobby shows up at the meeting place to see Lily, who she threatens, but then the man Lily works for shows up. His name is Isai. Isai tells her that David owes him a debt now for all the equipment that she destroyed, and in order to repay the debt, she needs to leave a door unlocked at her work so they can steal some military equipment. Draper then goes to the police to inform them of the kidnapping, but when she's brought to see an officer, it's the very same man, Isai, who had kidnapped her nephew. He calmly reasserts her only recourse is to leave the door unlocked, so she does so. Afterwards, she meets with Isai, who has released David and considers his debt paid. Isai then makes Draper an offer to work for him, where she could make much more money than she's making now, but she turns the offer down. On Illis, Holden, Alex, and Elvie investigate a disturbance and discover one of the large alien structures is moving very violently and causing the ground to break up. Holden deals with it by having the Rocinante fire a missile at the structure, destroying it. Elvie is not at all pleased by this decision, as she would rather study it. Meanwhile, the Belters are claiming a counterattack on Mertry, or they're planning a counterattack on Mertry and his men for killing Coop. They try to recruit Lucia into their cause, but she refuses. However, they insist she's already involved and imply that she was involved in bombing the heavy shuttle. And apparently, Mertry had tapped the Belters and was listening into their conversations, so he heard all of this. So Mertry and his team ambush the Belters when they meet to plan this attack, and Mertry and his men simply start shooting and killing all of the Belters. When the leader crawls out wounded, Mertry stands over him and shoots him in the head. In the Belt, Ashford and Drummer try to track down who's responsible for raiding the inter-colony ships, and they trace it back to a leader of a Belter faction known as Marco Inaros. They put a bounty on Inaros to be captured, and a Belter faction manages to capture him, and they turn him over to Drummer and Ashford. Incidentally, Marco is the same man who fathered a child with Naomi, so Drummer has a conversation with him about this, as she heard that he tricked Naomi into killing people and then stole her son away from him, and asks where he is now. Marco, however, refuses to tell her and insists that it is not how things went down and that Naomi was too cowardly to do what needed to be done, so ran away. Later, while Drummer and Ashford are transporting Inaros, they come under pursuit by Inaros' ship, and things don't look good for them. So as Drummer and the others go to repair the ship, Inaros takes the opportunity, being alone with Ashford, to try to recruit him into his cause, as Ashford is an infamous pirate. He says that he's just working as a lapdog for the Inners, and if he really wants to do good for the Belt, he'll come work for him. Ashford asks what difference could they make against the Inners, as they don't have the ships or the means. But Marco tells him he'd be surprised and tells him Mars isn't what it used to be. Ashford asks what Mars has to do with it, but Marco starts to suspect that something is wrong and refuses to say any more. It turns out that Marco's suspicions are correct, as it was just a ruse to try to get Marco to talk, as Ashford and Drummer were never in any danger, as they reveal 5 Belter ships lying in wait, and when they announce themselves, Marco's ship stops pursuing them and retreats. Ashford, Drummer, and the three heads of the present Belter factions meet in the airlock where Marco lies in wait to officially decide his execution. However, Marco makes an emboldened speech of how the belt needs to strike back against the Inners. Two of the heads of the Belter factions are convinced and they vote to let Marco go. But one of them votes for his execution, and Ashford backs this up, also voting for this execution, which leaves the final vote up to Drummer. But to everyone's surprise, Drummer votes to let him go, so Marco is released. Ashford confronts Drummer about this, but she says that if she had voted to execute Inaros, it would have fractured the alliance between the different Belter factions, possibly causing a civil war. So Drummer thought it was more important to avoid that, but Ashford still isn't convinced that it was the right thing to do. On Illis, Mercury and his forces take control of the settlement. Lucia is terrified that they're going to kill her, but Naomi promises to protect her, and they start to make their way to the Rocinante. Naomi calls Holden, who is still far away with Alex, and tells him what's going on. Holden calls Mercury and warns him not to harm Naomi, but this only tips him off that Lucia is with Naomi and they're headed towards the Rocinante, so he sends teams to head them off. He catches up to Naomi and Lucia before they get to the Rocinante and pins them down behind dunes. He manages to shoot and injure Lucia, and Naomi starts to succumb to her health problems and can barely move. So the situation feels hopeless, so Lucia confesses to being part of destroying the heavy shuttle and that she deserves to die, so she surrenders to Mercury. But before Mercury can kill her, Holden and Alex show up and use the Rocinante by remote to fire on Mercury's position. This allows Holden and Alex to rescue Naomi and Lucia and take them back to the ship. Alex then takes the Rocinante into orbit, saving Naomi's life, who wouldn't survive in the atmosphere any longer, and also getting Lucia away from Mercury. However, Holden stays behind on Illis to take care of the situation there. He confronts Mercury. He swears that he didn't want to hurt Naomi, he just wanted to bring a criminal to justice, but Holden responds to him by knocking Mercury on his ass, taking his weapon away from him, and telling him point blank that he isn't in charge here anymore. On Mars, Bobby Draper confesses to her superior for her part in the theft of equipment, but he simply asks her if she can do it again, as he wants to be cut in on the action, but this infuriates Draper, who quits in anger. Bobby ends up at a bar again where she meets up with Thomas once again, and the two of them drink to how much Mars has screwed them both. Bobby returns home drunk, and her brother tries to calm her down, but David comes out to her defense and cries out in anger about how she's being mistreated, but this only angers Bobby, who slams him against the wall and yells at him that he doesn't get to speak for her. But then the police arrive to arrest Bobby, as apparently her supervisor ratted her out. Later, as she sits in her jail cell, Esai comes to see her, and Bobby asks him if his job offer is still open. He tells her that since she doesn't work at the docks anymore, the position would have to be full-time, but she agrees, so he lets her out of the cell. In a flashback, we see Lucia planting the bomb on a landing platform with other Belters to try to destroy it so that the heavy shuttle can't land and will be forced to turn away. However, the heavy shuttle approaches earlier than expected, which means to blow up the platform now would damage the ship. But Coop and the others want to do exactly that. They want to destroy the heavy shuttle. Lucia argues with him and tries to remove the explosives, but Coop pushes her back and she hits her head and is knocked out. When she comes to, she's being driven away as Coop and the others plan to destroy the heavy shuttle, but Lucia sets off the explosives right away in the hopes that it won't destroy the shuttle. Back in the present, Lucia wakes up on the Rosinante and is suffering from her gunshot wound. Alex tries to treat her but doesn't know enough about medicine to do so, so asks for Lucia's help. But she refuses at first, saying that she doesn't deserve to live, but Alex convinces her to help him and she survives. Later, Jacob calls the Rosinante to speak to Lucia and informs her that their daughter Felcia is missing, but Lucia doesn't know where she is. She does admit to being involved in destroying the heavy shuttle. She tries to defend her actions as protecting their home, but Jacob puts out that there's nothing left to protect as they're being kicked off the planet, and he tells her that all the horrible things she did only made things worse for them, and then hangs up on her. Later, Naomi comes to visit her as she's feeling guilty and her role in killing those 23 people, but Naomi tells her the story of how Marco Renaros used her to destroy a UN ship, but she managed to turn her life around and do a lot of good, and suggests that Lucia could do the same. On Illis, Holden storms into the settlement demanding to see Amos. When he finds him, Amos is handcuffed to a bed being held by Way. Holden demands that she let him go, but she refuses, and just as the two are about to draw on each other, Murtry comes in and calms the situation down. Holden explains that the artifacts are waking up and that the one that the Rosinante destroyed would have leveled the entire settlement had they not destroyed it, and he makes it clear that if they don't all evacuate now, they'll die. So Murtry orders that Amos be released and intends to cooperate with the evacuation fully. Amos deduces that he's only helping them in order to get the Belters off the planet, but Murtry is wounded by this and insists that he isn't the bad guy here and he's just following the law. However, when Holden goes to Carol Chiwiwi, the mayor of the settlement, she refuses to leave, insisting it's just an RCE trick to get rid of them, and once they're gone, they'll never be allowed back. On Earth, Avasarala prepares for a debate as her staff and her husband coach her, but when her staff try to tell her to look like a caring matriarch, she gets upset, yells at them, and kicks them out. At the debate with Nancy Gown, the topic of another Eros-like threat comes up. Avasarala smugly answers that she would handle any future situation the same way she handled the last. And she looks like the very strong leader there to protect the people from an alien threat. However, later the topic of basic comes up and Avasarala accuses Nancy Gal of using political connections to jump the line and promises to close such loopholes in the future. But Gal retorts that it's odd that a member of the political elite is lecturing her about connections, and she puts out there that the man that she skipped over now works on her staff, and the second woman that she skipped over is now her head of security, but the third person that she skipped over died of a drug overdose. So she points out that this suffering need not occur if they could colonize the worlds beyond the Ring Gate, where there'd be plenty of resources for everyone. However, the debate is interrupted when a couple of generals escort Avasarala away as there's an emergency that she needs to deal with. They explain that a ship is on a direct collision course with Earth's asteroid spotter, which would severely cripple their defenses. When she asks why they haven't destroyed the ship yet, they play a message for her that came from the ship claiming to be a transport ship with children on board and temporarily lost control of navigation. However, an intelligence briefing comes in that claims that the ship on approach is the same colony ship that the OPA had reported had been raided and everyone on board had been killed. So Avasarala gives the order to destroy the ship. On Ellis, Elvie confronts Holden on the fact that he's clearly hiding something, that clearly he knows something more about the alien artifacts that he isn't sharing, and every time she asks, he deflects. But their conversation is interrupted by gunshots, as apparently some of the Belters have taken a couple of RCE security men hostage, and a standoff ensues. Way tries to aggressively push forward, but is then pushed back. So Mercury, Way, Holden, and Amos regroup and figure out what to do, and Mercury announces that he's going to gas them all, but following Naomi's advice, Holden tries a more diplomatic approach and talks to the Belters, and he ends up standing in between the Belters and the RCE team as they yell at each other. Holden then comes clean about seeing and talking to Miller, and that he is now turning on all of the alien artifacts that are putting all their lives in danger. At first they don't believe him, but Amos backs him up. But Carol Chiwewe still insists that the Belters aren't leaving, and Mercury announces that there's no scenario where he leaves these squatters and murderers in possession of this planet, and the situation deteriorates into yelling chaos. In orbit, a scientist named Fayez Sarkis, who is a friend of Elvi, is studying some strange geological activity on the other side of the planet. He calls Naomi on the Rosnate to coordinate their observations, and at first Naomi isn't responsive as she insists that his boss shot at her, but Fayez insists that Mercury is not his boss, and he thinks that Mercury is an ass. So Naomi cooperates. Later, when Alex is alone in the command center, he notices something strange going on in the same location of islands, and then in awe witnesses a massive atomic explosion going off on the planet. When Naomi comes up to investigate, Alex explains to her that the whole island the explosion was on is just gone. Naomi says it's like a reactor failure. They call Holden and Amos and tell them what happened, so Holden goes to the Belters and the RC teams who are still yelling at each other, and Amos has to shoot his gun in the air to stop them and get them to listen. Holden warns them that a massive shockwave followed by a tsunami is headed their way, along with massive winds, all of which would completely level the settlement, and they need to evacuate immediately. After Carol Chiwewe confirms this with her ship, the Barbara Bacola, in orbit, she agrees to leave as long as Holden promises to support their claim to return to the planet, and Holden promises that he'll do what he can, but Mercury isn't at all happy about this. While he's preparing to evacuate, Jacob gets a call from the Barbara Bacola where the captain tells him he found something that belongs to him, and he then reveals Felsia, who had apparently stowed away on the supply shuttle that went up to the Barbara Bacola. Felsia apologizes and said she did it because she wanted to go to university in the belt. Jacob says that it's okay, it was his fault for pushing this on her, but when she asks if her mother's upset, he tells her what happened to Lucia. On the Rosinante, Alex gives Lucia the good news that Felsia is okay and she's on the Barbara Bacola, so Lucia is happy and calls the Barbara Bacola in order to talk to her, but Felsia is upset at her mother over what she did and says that they both ended up running away. The difference is that Felsia didn't kill anyone on her way out. Later, Alex, dismayed, reports that the fusion reactors just stopped working on the Rosnate, and they are able to confirm that the reactors on the Edward Israel and the Barbara Bacola went out as well. So they deduce that the protomolecule technology is somehow preventing fusion. Lucia comes up on the command center in time to hear them mention that the Barbara Bacola is in low orbit and will eventually fall out of the sky and disintegrate in the atmosphere, but Alex clarifies that although the Rosnate and Edward Israel may last longer, eventually they all will. At Medina Station, Drummer and Ashford get a visit from the UN captain of the Tripoli in regards to the loss of contact with Illis, and is going to send an unmanned probe through the ring gates to reestablish contact. When Drummer states that she has no objections, the UN clarifies that he wasn't asking her for permission. He then states how upset they all are that the ship that nearly destroyed Earth's asteroid spotter was reported destroyed by Drummer. Ashford insists that it was. The captain also points out that a comm laser was sent from the ship to the belt shortly before it was destroyed, accusing them of being involved in this attack. But Drummer insists that the man responsible is a terrorist named Marco Inaros and that he will be dealt with, but the UN captain insists that he should have been dealt with already. Meanwhile, the captain's lieutenant is looking out the windows at Medina Station, sizing the place up with an implied threat involved. Drummer assures them that Marco will be dealt with, and the captain simply suggests that next time they meet on his ship, and then they leave. Drummer and Ashford are not pleased at this turn of events. Later, however, they turn up intel on Marco Inaros' current whereabouts and that he is on a transport ship headed to Palace. Drummer insists they need to intercept him before he gets there, otherwise he will disappear, but Ashford argues that they don't have the ships. But Drummer says that she'll share this information with Fred Johnson and Anderson Dawes, who will give them all the ships they need to stop Marco. On Ellis, after the news that the ships in orbit reactors have failed, they come up with another plan to use a light shuttle from the Edward Israel to evacuate everyone. However, when they try that, the shuttle burns up in the atmosphere, no doubt another defense system activated by the protomolecule technology. So Holden comes up with another plan to hide everyone inside the alien structure, as he's sure it can withstand the tsunami. So Holden and Murtry then enact a plan to blow up the alien structure so they can get everyone inside. However, while Elvie is evacuating important equipment from the settlement, she discovers an alien microorganism has infected her eyes. But before she can tell anyone, Holden comes to evacuate her, telling her that they're running out of time. Just then, a shockwave hits, and she and Holden jump for cover as glass shatters all around them, and several people are killed in the shockwave. But Holden takes Elvie and the remaining survivors of the settlement to the alien structure, and they all hide inside just in the nick of time as the tsunami wipes out the settlement and hits the alien structure, where the survivors are safe. On Mars, Bobby Draper is now fully working for Esai. They and Lili meet with a man named Beltram, who has a job for them to steal more military-grade equipment. Bobby is friendly to Beltram, whom she recognizes as having served in the Martian military, but Beltram is cold and rude to her in return. On her time off, Bobby is living the high life with her new income and stays the night at a hotel with Thomas as things between them have escalated. When Thomas points out her new wealth, she says that she got a new consulting job. Later, when Bobby, Esai, Lili, and Beltram go to pull off the job, they find that Beltram's codes aren't working, so Esai calls to abort. But Draper comes up with a plan to put a thin suit with limited oxygen on, and she risks her life by climbing outside the platform to the top of the tower and lets Esai and the others in from the inside, thus proving her worth. On the Rosinante, Alex and Naomi laid out to Lucia just how hopeless the situation is. Lucia starts to despair. Later, Naomi talks to Felsia as she helps with trying to prepare the Barbara Bacola, and Naomi tries to convince her to talk to her mother as she's still a good person and she still loves her, but she says it doesn't really matter anymore. Later, Alex finds Lucia in the mess hall feeling sad about how Felsia doesn't want to talk to her anymore. So Alex tells her the story about his family, about a happy moment he had with his son, but how his ex-wife and son don't want to see him anymore, and he's been cut out of their lives. So he warns her not to let the same thing happen to her with her family. Lucia then comes up with a plan to save the Barbara Bacola, so they contact the Barb to tell Felsia. But when Felsia sees her mother, she insists she doesn't want to talk to her, but Naomi asks her to hear her out, and Lucia outlines her plan to save the Barb by reshaping mining nets to form a kilometer-long cable to tether to the Rosnate so the Rosnate can lift the Barb out of orbit. Felsia and the Barb captain are excited by this idea, so they get started on it. On Illis, things are bleak for everyone as they are trapped in the alien structure with limited supplies of food and water. Mercury orders his men not to share any of their supplies with the Belters. However, things take a turn for the worse when Elvie discovers the green organisms has affected everyone's eyes. She's determined it's an alien single-cell organism that attaches itself to the water in human eyes, and it will cause everyone to go blind in just a day. However, Elvie discovers that not everyone is infected, as Holden appears to be immune. But she doesn't know why, but finding out may be the key to finding a cure. However, a fight breaks out between a RCE security officer and a Belter, as the security officer insists that the Belter was trying to steal his water, but Mercury breaks up the fight and scolds his officer and apologizes to the Belter. Way is confused by his change in strategy, but Mercury explains that the blindness changes everything as the Belters outnumber them, so they're all going blind and they need to temporarily make peace with them. Mercury also explains to her that if they play their cards right, they'll both be insanely rich. When Way says that Holden would interfere with Mercury's plan, Mercury suggests that they'll just have to kill him. Later, an RCE security officer finds the officer who had fought with the Belter earlier dead, lying in the water, so he assumes that the Belter man killed him, so he punches him and drags him to the water where he starts to drown him. But Holden, Amos, Way, and Mercury all intercede, tell him to stop, and point their guns at him. Mercury tells his officer that if he doesn't stop, he'll shoot him himself, so he stops and lets the Belter man up for air. But when he comes up, he's covered in green alien slugs, and he starts choking and gasping for air, and then he falls over dead. Then more green slugs fall on the security officer, and then he starts gasping for air, and then he falls to the ground dead. So when they realize the slugs are poisonous and can instantly kill people, Holden then shines his light in the dome, discovering that these death slugs are everywhere. On Earth, Avasarala had to give a speech apologizing for the attack on the orbital platform. She's upset over the speech, feeling that she shouldn't have done it as it just makes her look weak. When her husband tries to convince her it was the right thing to do, she just yells at him, so he gets upset and leaves. Later, she goes to his work, apologizing to him, saying that this election has her on edge. She then meets with UN generals that tell her that they got intel from a reliable source in the belt, which we later learn was Fred Johnson, that Marco Inaros is on a transport ship headed to Pallas. She asks the generals for options, and they suggest a missile strike to destroy the ship. Since the ship is a civilian transport, she rejects that option and asks for another one. So they then suggest to fire shots crippling the ship and then sending a strike team to retrieve Inaros. She greenlights that plan, saying that it's important to put Marco on trial to deter anyone else in the belt from taking similar actions. So Avasarala and a team of generals watch as the op goes down, and a strike team infiltrates the transport looking for Inaros, but they can't find him. They get to ops to take control of the ship, but are fired upon, and then shortly after, someone detonates a bomb that destroys the ship, and all of the strike team and civilians on board are killed. On Mars, Bobby Draper attends a meeting with Isai, Lily, and Beltran when Beltran has brought a big score for them. All they need to do is escort merchandise to a meet-off with the buyers, and they will be paid a lot of money. When Bobby asks what it is they are stealing, she's told that they don't know, and she deduces that they're being paid to keep quiet, and Lily says that she doesn't have a problem with that. Later, Bobby tracks Isai down to his home and is surprised to learn that he has a wife and child. When they're alone, Bobby tells him that she doesn't like the job, it doesn't smell right, and that he shouldn't go through with it as it's too dangerous. Isai then explains with the money he makes from this job, he can take his family and leave Mars to go beyond the ring gates. When she asks why, he tells her to look around at Mars, that it's falling apart. With the news that there are perfectly habitable worlds out there to colonize, no one is interested in terraforming Mars anymore, and the whole world economy is starting to fall apart. So Isai declares that he's going through with it, but Bobby tells him that she's out. Later, when Bobby has another encounter with Thomas in the hotel room, he tells her that he's leaving Mars as he got a job in the belt. She's angry that everyone is abandoning Mars, and she takes that anger out on Thomas, and the two of them part in anger. On Ilus, everyone is hiding in the alien structure and is now blind, except for Holden. They have taken to huddling in their own camps. As if anyone wanders off alone, they are killed by the death slugs. Holden tells Carol Chiwiwi to warn him if she hears anyone else wandering off, and later she calls out that she heard someone leave. Holden goes to investigate and finds out that it's Amos who's walking right into a nest of death slugs. When Holden tries to stop Amos, he attacks him, as it's clear that he wants to die because he can't stand feeling so helpless. But Holden talks him down, explaining that he needs him. Later, Elvie tries to figure out what makes Holden immune, so takes a sample of his eye fluid. She doesn't find out what makes him immune, but learns that he has cancerous cells. Holden explains that he already knew that, as he was eradicated on Eros and has to take cancer meds. Elvie then deduces that the cancer meds are what are killing off the organisms, so she works to mass produce the meds. They commence treating everyone who begin to regain their sight. However, the first thing that Mercury does is to plan to use the remaining light shuttle on the Edward Israel in order to attack the Rosinante. On Earth, one of Avasarella's generals goes to her and resigns as he accuses her of putting her own political motivations over the greater good, saying that they shouldn't have attacked a transport ship with as little intel, and he accuses her of doing so in order to look good in her campaign, so she accepts his resignation. Later, Avasarala gives a speech at a memorial service for the Marines that lost their lives in the failed attack and uses the death of her son to explain how she relates. This makes her look good in the media, but her husband Arjun doesn't appreciate her using the death of their son to gain political points. Later, Arjun is watching the news and sees the footage of the tsunamis and alien devices and other tragedies going on Ilus/New Terror have been leaked to the media. He immediately goes to his wife and asks if she leaked the footage, and she immediately admits that she did. She said that the campaign should have always been about New Terror, and it is now again. But Arjun is disgusted and doesn't like the lengths that she's going to in order to win. On Medina Station, Fred Johnson arrives and is greeted by Drummer, who punches him in the face. Drummer is angry because she had expected him to supply ships for her to go after Marco and Aris, but instead he simply gave the intel to the UN, which resulted in a disaster which has only rallied more Belters to Marco's cause. However, Johnson scolds her for letting Marco go when she could have executed him, saying that he's just cleaning up her mess. She says she did it to save the belt, and Johnson says that's why he did what he did as well, because now they're in a better position to negotiate with the UN for the removal of their warship from the ring space and to prevent them from taking control of Medina Station. Drummer is disgusted by this and resigns. Ashford goes to her later and tries to talk her out of it, but Drummer no longer knows what's the best path forward and questions if perhaps Marco is right, but Ashford reassures her that he's not, and then tells her that he's taking his best men on a mission to hunt Marco down and finish the job. Later, when Ashford is preparing to leave on his quest, Drummer comes on board to farewell him by giving him a gift of a bottle of spirits. He asks Drummer what she's going to do now. She just shrugs her shoulders and says, "Stay out of politics." So Ashford asks for a favor as he returns the bottle to her and asks her to save it so they can drink it together when he gets back. On Illis, Holden climbs down by himself in the tunnels, and Miller appears to him. Holden asks him where the hell he's been, and Miller just screams in pain. He then appears without his hat and explains that he's Miller, but the guy with the hat is the protomolecules puppet, the Investigator. He tells Holden that he has a plan to disable the protomolecule technology on the planet for good, that there's a blank spot that he can't see, so he believes it's whatever killed the protomolecule creator, so he wants Holden to take him there so they can use it to kill everything protomolecule on the planet. Holden asks how he knows for sure it will work, but Miller says that he doesn't know for sure, but his only alternative is to watch his friends slowly starve to death as his ships fall out of the sky. So he agrees to it, so Miller takes Holden to a hole in the ground and tells him to jump in. Holden's hesitant, so he puts his hand in and finds that it's filled with the same purple haze that was in the slow zone. But before he can jump in, Elvie comes and Miller disappears. She overheard some of his conversation with Miller and demands to go with him. But Holden says no because he needs Miller to guide him and he doesn't appear if anyone else is around. But he promises her that if what he's doing works, it will save them all, and then he jumps in the hole. Meanwhile, Mercury is told about the Rosinante, how it's saving the Barbara Piccola, so he orders that they send a shuttle as a bomb to the Rosinante in order to attack them. And he knows that Holden and Amos won't stand by while he does this, so he tells Wade that it's time to move against them. But no one can find Holden, but Elvie returns and Mercury can tell that she knows something, so he intimidates her until she tells him where Holden went. So he and Wade go after him in order to stop him. Amos then finds Elvie under guard, and he easily dispenses with the guard and asks Elvie where Holden went. She takes him to the hole, and Amos proclaims that he's going after Holden. Elvie says that she's going with him and tells him that he can't stop her. Amos says that he's not the boss of her, but warns her that it may be a one-way trip, but she retorts that they're all on a one-way trip, so they both jump into the hole. In orbit, the Rosinante enacts their plan to save the Barbara Piccola by tethering it, and it starts to work. Lucia and Naomi work on the Rosinante end of the tether, while Felsia works on the Barbara Piccola end of the tether, and they coordinate their efforts. However, on the Edward Israel, Fayez Sarkis notices that they launched their only remaining shuttle. Fayez complains to the security officer in charge, asking why they launched the last shuttle as it's a valuable resource that they may need, but the officer simply tells him he doesn't need to know. When Fayez angry persists to be told what's going on, the officer reaches for his gun in his holster and warns Fayez to sit back down, so he does. However, Fayez then messages Alex on the Rosinante to warn him that the shuttle is on its way. Alex calls the Edward Israel and asks why the shuttle is coming towards them, but they just say stand by. Alex then messages the shuttle and tells them to veer off or will be fired upon, but it just increases its speed, so Alex calls down to Lucia and Naomi and warns them to brace as they are under attack. Alex fires on the shuttle, destroying it, but the debris of the shuttle smashes into where Naomi and Lucia are, and one of them clips a canister that then goes flying out and hits Lucia dead on, knocking her into space. Lucia starts to panic as she spins helplessly in space, but Naomi attaches a cable to her and jumps out to catch her. She manages to reach Lucia and pulls her back to the Rosinante. Once there, Alex reveals the damage from the debris set both ships back crashing towards the planet even faster. Lucia suggests they simply let go of the other ship and save the people. Naomi is hesitant as she knows the ship has their lithium, which the settlers desperately need in order to survive, but Lucia said that they tried everything, but Alex tells her that they haven't. He then comes up with the plan to use the railgun to stop the Rosnate spin and get them back on track. Naomi warns doing so will be dangerous, but they agree and they try it and it works. On Ellis, Holden arrives at his destination, which is apparently very far from where they were. Miller guides him through a labyrinth of strange alien structure before finally leading him into a room where the blind spot is. Holden sees a giant black hole surrounded by glowing lights. He describes it as looking like the eye of an angry god. But Miller doesn't see anything. Miller explains that his plan is for him to put himself into something physical, and then he wants Holden to get him close to the angry god thing, and then he's going to connect himself to every piece of alien technology on the planet, turning it all on, and then he's going to go inside the hole, which will kill everything. It's then Holden realizes that Miller came here to die, but Miller says that this isn't any kind of life anyway. He then momentarily blinks out as the investigator returns, but Miller returns and explains that they're not happy about what he's trying to do. Amos and Elvie then arrive to find Way waiting for them. Way tells Amos Mercury wants to stop Holden from turning off the alien technology as it could make them all rich, and pleads with him to join them where they can make fortunes. But Amos simply tells her he's going to stop Mercury, and if that she gets in his way, he'll go through her, and she says that he can't let him do that, so they fire on each other. Amos kills Way, and Way wounds Amos, but Mercury, who was actually just hiding around the corner, shoots at Amos several times, shooting his hand off and wounding him in the leg. Amos fires back at Mercury, who retreats. Amos yells at Elvie to run. She does and eventually finds Holden in the room with the Eye of the Angry God. She tells him what happened and that she doesn't know if Amos is still alive. Holden says that he's going after Amos and tells her to wait there. However, when she does, Miller appears, who had put himself into a strange robot device. Elvie realizes who he is, and he tells her to guide him to the angry god thing, so she does. Meanwhile, Holden walks back on the narrow bridge that he came from, but Mercury comes from the other direction and blocks his path. Holden tells him to put his weapon down and surrender, but Mercury refuses, and a shootout ensues in which Holden is only wounded slightly, but Mercury takes a much bigger hit, which disables him, and he drops his gun. Mercury tells Holden to finish the job, but Holden says that he is finished and leaves him there as he goes to check on Elvie. Miller turned on the entire planet and tells Elvie to guide him into the angry god thing, but something grabs him and takes him away, a protomolecule technology trying to stop him. He eventually gets away from it, but is wounded and can't move, so Elvie has to drag him into the eye. Holden returns just as Elvie and the Miller bot fall into the eye of the angry god. Holden calls out, but it is too late. On Mars, Bobby follows Beltran to find out if he's up to something, but she runs into Lily and her goons who threaten her. However, Bobby realizes that Lily was also following Beltran as well, as she doesn't trust him either, so the two of them have a talk over drinks to discuss their misgivings on Beltran and this job. Lily agrees with Bobby that Isai is being short-sighted on this one, but she refuses to give up on the score as it's too much money. She asks Bobby if she's going to report them to the authorities, but she says no. Later, Bobby investigates Beltran to find he's part of a much bigger team involved in all sorts of black ops. So she goes to his room only to find that he's dead of an apparent cardiac arrest, but she knows that the deal is a trap, so she tries to call Isai to warn him, but he ignores her calls. She then goes to the meet where she sees Isai and his team meeting with a team of Belters, but there are some people lying in wait ready to ambush them, so she warns them that it's a trap and attacks their ambushers. But several people are shot and killed, including Isai. Bobby chases the Belters out into a courtyard as they try to get away with the merchandise. She shoots at them, but they manage to get away in an elevator before announcing that they left her a present. She realizes that it's a bomb and she tries to run back into the warehouse, but the bomb explodes and crashes open the dome, and a crane falls, crashing into the airlock, preventing it from closing. Bobby is knocked out, but the air is being blown out, and she wakes up and she grabs Lily, who is hunched over Isai's corpse, and drags her to safety. Once out, Bobby deduces it was stealth technology that they stole and that Isai and his team were never meant to survive. Lily suggests that they run away to Ceres, where she has friends that can hide them, but Bobby tells her to go without her, that she's staying behind in order to investigate what happened. Lily balks at her trying to take on this conspiracy alone, but she assures her that she won't be alone. On Illis, Holden helps Elvie up, who's disorientated but alright. He asks her if what she saw in there, but she said it was more of that she felt something between the spaces that was coming for her. She then dismisses it as sounding crazy, but Holden assures her that it's not crazy, as it's what he feels every time he goes through the ring gates. Later, he goes and retrieves Amos, who's still alive, and he retrieves Murtry, and he also makes Amos promise not to kill Murtry. He then climbs to the top of the structure to get reception. There, he learns that all the ships in orbit have regained their power, and all 3 ships are going to be okay. He calls for the Rosnate to pick them all up. They return to the Rosnate, where Alex informs Murtry that he's not a guest, he's their prisoner. Holden and Naomi are reunited, and later Naomi muses how tragic it is that Lucia is going to be put in prison after all she's been through, that she deserved a chance at redemption. Holden agrees that it was tragic what happened to Lucia, that despite Naomi's best efforts, she wasn't able to save her from dying in space. Naomi then hugs him as she realizes that he's going to let Lucia return to her family on Illis and tell the UN that she died. Elvie and Fias unite on Illis to work and live in harmony with the Belters as they work together to establish a new colony, as the Rosnate heads back towards the ring gates, bringing Felsia with them so she can attend university. On Earth, the news of Holden's success reaches the news feeds. Avasarala's campaign manager suggests they can use this to their advantage, as she's the one who sent Holden. However, Avasarala explains that Holden had proven that the alien technology isn't a threat, and that the Belters and RCE teams work together to defeat the evil components in both factions, and are now working in harmony to colonize the planet, and they're going to make a fortune in the process. She notes that Nancy Gall couldn't have written a better narrative if she had written it herself. And indeed, Nancy Gall wins the election. Avasarala meets with her husband Arjun, where she asks him to go to Luna with her as she begins the process of stepping down, but he refuses, suggesting that he needs some time apart from her, as he's not okay with the person that she became during the campaign. Avasarala then leaves a farewell message to Nancy Gall, wishing her well and telling her that one of them is wrong and that she thinks it's Nancy, but she hopes that it's her. She then gets a call from Bobby Draper telling her there's a conspiracy on Mars that she needs help with, but Avasarala only notes to herself that Bobby's timing fucking sucks. The Rosnate heads back to the Sol system as Holden removes the last traces of the protomolecule from the deck plating of the Rosnate that allowed Miller to communicate with him. Holden says goodbye to Miller in his own way as he shoots the last bit of protomolecule into the sun. Felsia says goodbye to her family Jacob and Lucia, who are reunited and are raising an orphan boy together, and they are all on good terms now. News of Marco Nars's rise to power has reached Naomi, who becomes worried about her son Philip, so she sends a message to Fred Johnson telling him that he still owes her a favor and tells him to find her son so that she can save him. Later, Amos goes to visit Murtry, and Murtry muses how Amos is going to attack a man who's restrained, so Amos removes Murtry's restraints. Amos complains to Murtry that he made him kill Way, that he liked Way, and Murtry punches him. Amos gets a huge grin on his face, then proceeds to beat the ever-loving crap out of Murtry. In the belt, Ashford works to hunt down Marco Naros. He finds a Martian officer who is working with Marco, and his men torture the officer for information, but Ashford doesn't approve of the treatment of this prisoner, so he puts an end to it. He asks the Martian why he was working with the Belter terrorist, and he says for money. Ashford asks how a Martian loyalist could betray his nation, but he answers that Mars isn't what it used to be, which is exactly what Marco had said to him earlier. The Martian sends them to an asteroid belt to find Marco, but he isn't there. But an investigation finds that Marco removed 2 asteroids. Ashford deduces that Marco is going to hurl the rocks at Tycho and Ceres stations to get back at Fred Johnson and Dawes. He goes to ask the Martian about it further, but the Martian has killed the man who was torturing him, and Ashford's other men shoot and kill the Martian in retaliation. However, Ashford manages to find Marco Naros' ship anyway, and he has them outgunned, and he sends a raiding party on board. Ashford shoots his way past Marco's men until it looks like he's alone with Marco on the bridge. However, Marco's son Philip sneaks up behind him and points his gun at him, so Ashford surrenders. Marco then takes Ashford to the airlock, and Marco and Philip stand over him much in the same way that Ashford and Drummer had stood over him before. Ashford then records their conversation and asks Marco what he has to gain from hurling rocks at Tycho and Ceres, and Marco agrees that he has nothing to gain, that the days of Belters attacking each other are over. When Ashford asks what his target is, Marco muses that Ashford can't even fathom it, and then tells him to die in darkness. He then opens the door, and Ashford floats out into space where he dies, but not before he transmits his conversation with Marco. On the bridge of Marco's ship, he and Philip plot out the trajectories of their targets that they plan to throw asteroids at. Philip asks if they're going to be able to spot them with their asteroid spotter, but Marco says that they learned a lot about its capabilities with the incident with the Sojourner, and that they know where their weak spots are. Marco also muses that Earth's best technology can't see through Martian stealth technology. He then plots out the map that shows that all the asteroids that he's sending are on a direct collision course with Earth. So that's it for my Expanse Season 4 recap. Thanks so much for watching. As I mentioned at the top of the video, if you'd like a recap of Seasons 1, 2, and 3, there are links to those in the description below. And be sure to check out my coverage of the Expanse Season 5 as I cover each and every episode with a review, a live discussion video, and a book to show comparison video. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.